Greetings and welcome to the Transform Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio, and this is Season 2, Episode 11. Today's guest is David Hori, CEO of Top Line Operators. David helps business owners take a step back or out of their business. He has scaled 3 companies that exited and has accumulated 25 years of scaling leadership. Brands he has worked with include Woven by Toyota, Andreessen Horowitz, or A16Z, Madrona Venture Group, Microsoft, Pioneer Square Labs, K&L Gates, Fairmont Hotels and Resorts, and more. David, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Chris, this is going to be a great conversation. I'm stoked. This is going to be great.
Absolutely. Based on our first preliminary one, I totally agree with you. I'm really excited to do this with you, David. Instead of doing the traditional, what's your bio, where were you born, that sort of thing, I figured we'd jump right into, along these lines of scaling and exiting. Where we would want to start, I think, is like diving right into, in your experience, what did you believe about growth early in your career that you now strongly disagree with? So we can sort of start off with, there's anything you learned along the way that maybe got debunked or you feel differently about now or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are many lessons that I have learned along the way. I'm happy to share a few of them. One of them is that education is the path to starting any endeavor. And there is a small amount of value in not starting blindly, but it is completely eclipsed, I would say, by the value of taking action and folding those learnings into building, doing, scaling, etc. And it applies to starting a business, exiting a business. Something that is in motion is much easier to direct.
Interesting. I've definitely come across many times before variations of, too much education is really paralysis. Too much thinking it over before you start is never going to get you anywhere. Things of that nature. So really interesting that you zeroed in on that, David. And I think I would follow that with, for you in your personal experience, was there a turning point, and we get a little more tactical here, that shaped how you think about, let's say, brand versus performance? Like, was there anything along the way that kind of influenced you that way?
Yeah, one of the instincts that has to be resisted if you're starting a business is the instinct to start with like the logo, start with the business cards. I have made that mistake before, so I'm speaking from experience. Learn from my mistakes, because what doesn't sell and bring money in the door is the logo that you spent hours trying to manipulate in Canva. But what does is getting out there and getting rejected a ton, calling prospective customers, talking to them, understanding their pain points, and then again, continually folding those learnings into the next phone call, the next iteration. You have to start with doing things that add value to your target customer. And you might find that you're serving a really small customer group. I was actually speaking with a business owner who was very, very niche down, and I asked him, how many people do you think in your universe is going to be interested in that? And he had no answer, but the answer was going to be less than a few hundred total. And so that's a really tiny market to address, and you might need to expand what you're focused on in order to be successful ultimately.
Okay. So I think there's a good segue there, David, for the next question I wanted to ask you, which is, and maybe in some ways you started to answer it there, but what's a pattern you've seen repeatedly across companies that you deal with in terms of something that founders miss, something they've skipped over, something they've glossed over, something they haven't even accounted for? Is there any kind of pattern that emerges with that? Maybe it's in making assumptions that there's value in what they're providing, kind of to what you said. But can you expand on that or add some insight to that?
Yeah, maybe I'll give 2. One for somebody that's like in the thick of building and looking for a nugget there. And then one for business owners that should be and maybe aren't thinking about selling their business. So the first I would share with you is that nobody can do it as good as you, and that's a bad thing. That's a myth that I want to blow up right away. It may be true that nobody's going to sell exactly like you, or somebody might not have the same eye for the product that you do, but somebody else doing a task that you're doing, even to 80% of your capability, is 100% awesome. And that's something that I see so many business owners use as an excuse, and it becomes a stumbling block to growth in that, well, I can't find anybody. I've hired a couple people. They can't do it as good as me. So I'm going to do everything, and that's going to be better. And you can't find a single billionaire out there who, Warren Buffett probably was the best at reviewing businesses and understanding the nuance of the financials and the opportunities. But he entrusted some analysts that had half of his compute capability and expertise to build that empire. And that's the one that I would share with somebody that's in the trenches right now, scaling. The second, this actually surprises a lot of business owners. If you have a business, there are literally only two outcomes for your business. You either sell your business or shut it down. Sell or shut down. And many business owners don't think in those terms, but shutting down, I think in many business owners' minds, sounds kind of neutral. Like, yeah, I kind of get it, makes sense. You start winding things down, stop taking new clients, and slowly kind of just close the doors. But it actually costs a tremendous amount of money to do that. It costs money. It also is really hard on the team. If you have team members, employees, etc., watching you take your foot off the gas and like the downward spiral of the business, not knowing when the end is coming, is hard on your team. And lastly, it's one of the decisions I see business owners regret the most. They've built something for years, maybe even decades, and they don't get cashed out at the end. They don't get to reap the rewards of all of those blood, sweat, and tears. And then they just kind of like fade off into the sunset with nothing to show for it, and that's a source of regret.
It's a very helpful framing mechanism for as somebody enters into an entrepreneurial endeavor to start with the realization it's going to go one of those two ways. And I've never heard that anywhere else, but it's absolutely true. David, so really appreciate you sharing that with the audience. I want to actually go back to something you said in the first point, where you said, and I wrote this down here, 80% equals 100% awesome. That has a great ring to it. I hope you got the trademark. But in all seriousness, that is something that I think, just hearing it myself, having some experience in these kind of endeavors, it reduces the agonizing factor of like, should I hand it off? Should I let somebody else take this over? Am I okay with letting go? And I think just packaging it that way brings such clarity to it. So I really appreciate you. Just even the coinage of that phrase is super, super helpful. And I think, as we kind of pivot from this part to the next part of the discussion, if you had to describe the lens you put on business in just one sentence, what would it be? Maybe you've already said it along the way here, but is there a way that you look at, like when you come in to help a business out, and you're going to get involved with that brand or that business, what do you apply from a lens perspective to it right away? What are you looking for?
There's a few lenses that I could highlight, but a lot of them roll up to one single word. When I'm looking to buy a business, I am looking at risk. I am an investor, and I am willing to pay top dollar for top companies, but it doesn't mean the one that has the highest revenue or the most number of employees or the longest tenure. I am looking at risk factors, and it's things like dependency on the owner. It's things like, tenure is actually a really strong signal for me. If you've weathered multiple upturns and downturns in the market and the economy and tariffs and all of that, then you are likely to continue to persist. And, one other risk thing that I think many owners don't think about, they actually kind of brag about it when I talk to them. They're like, oh, we've got this customer that's been with us for years, and, we do probably 90% of our business with them, and they've been with us for decades. To me, what happens if that customer leaves or doesn't like me as the new owner? Like 90% of my income going away sounds tremendously scary. So I look at everything through the lens of risk.
Okay. Excellent. Definitely, I think that looking at a series of risk factors like that, being able to sort of triage them, see that right away. That's something that I imagine you took time to develop, and you had to kind of have some experience with. Well, where did that go wrong, or where did that go right, and then sort of refining your criteria for that.
Yeah, it's something that's definitely evolved over the years. I think everybody has a bias. Like if you, like early in my career, I came from an HR background where I was really focused a lot on the team, their capabilities, making sure that they were trained properly. They had, the infrastructure to support them excelling. And that's still important. And a lot of times when I start diagnosing root causes in organizations, like a lot of times I do tend to conclude like, oh, you've got a people problem. Whereas somebody that comes from a finance background, maybe, will look at the same kind of inputs and conclude, wow, you've got like a cash flow problem, or we need to drive revenue, right? Like my bias is people, but certainly, again, I started realizing there's bigger things that even like, okay, we can probably continue as is with the team we have, with the level of training they have, but there are some big risks that we need to start mitigating and putting things in place that offset those risks in order to, again, ensure that we're growing in a sustainable way.
Okay. So David, if we shift a little bit towards like the founder's psychology, if you will, the tension and scaling, what do you think? What's the mindset shift that has to happen to get a company that's, let's say, generating $1 million in revenue to 10x that or beyond? Is there something that takes hold that allows them to break through and do that? Is it just unique to the situation, the individual each time? How do you view that kind of hump that you have to get over, if you will, to make a move like that?
You have to adopt the explorer mindset. And what I mean by that is you have to be willing to lose sight of everything that you knew and is familiar to you for a very long time. The trap, if you've been a successful business owner, and let's say you've scaled your revenue to $3 million, the trap is that you think you can continue to make tiny optimizations and tweaks to enhance, the delivery and pricing and all these little tweaks, and that you're somehow going to magically then scale to 10 million. And that's just not true. To break past that, a lot of people call it the ceiling, right? To break through that ceiling, you need a new playbook entirely. And you know what? The team that probably got you from, 100,000 to your first 3 million probably isn't going to be the team that takes you to the next 10. And the processes, the types of customers, like all these things that have become familiar and really comfortable for you are going to keep you from actually breaking through and getting to that $10 million mark or whatever the next threshold is. And so again, it's not an optimization. It's not something that you can make tiny tweaks to get to along the way. You need a new playbook. And that's what I would share.
Okay. So David, where do you think founders get in their own way the most often?
Well, one thing that I see, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of EOS, where you have like a visionary and an implementer. It's a common framework to help people think through, scaling businesses and bringing consistency to it. But that framework was helpful for me in that, when I was in startup land, I was being hired by a visionary. They had this great idea. Tons of people agreed that it was a great idea and gave them millions of dollars. And he hired somebody like me, who is where the rubber meets the road. And I'm going to hire the people. I'm going to put those systems and processes in place, etc. Now, what happens when you have a visionary running a company is that you have this shiny object syndrome where they like see all the opportunities and these great ideas and they want to like pivot the team and be agile. And that's all to the good until it keeps you from actually achieving anything. And so one thing that I see is many people who start businesses or eventually own businesses and run them are visionaries, and they need to be balanced out by somebody that says, okay, you have enough ideas. I think somebody, said this to Jeff Bezos, right? You have enough ideas to completely sink Amazon. Congratulations. And their role was to offset his ideas and his visionary genius and ensure that the team was focused on the most important thing, the next step that ultimately took them towards the ultimate goal of Amazon, and didn't distract them with a bunch of side quests. And so I think not recognizing that, trying to do everything yourself, trying to continue to outthink, your competition and out pivot them versus committing to a North Star and going in that direction and doubling down on what works. I think that's one.
So what do you think the biggest difference is between companies that scale, to some magnitude, and those that stall out? And is there a biggest difference? Is it just a variety of factors that can in the aggregate create the stall effect?
There are a number of different factors, but adaptation has to be one of the top reasons. The inability to adapt, and again, I've already probably mentioned it now twice, learn and fold those learnings into your next action is tremendously powerful if you want to scale and succeed. And it's the ones that are like, well, this is how we've always done it. This is how we've always engaged with our customers. This is how we've delivered service. This is the product that got us to where we are. So let's not make any changes, rock the boat, etc. Those ones are in extreme risk of never scaling and ultimately actually slowly declining until they no longer exist.
So this is a question I'm really interested in how you approach it. How much of growth is actually operational, and how much of it is emotional discipline? Or just a mastery of oneself, in a sense. I mean, how do you feel when you hear that?
I think that's a really good question.
Especially, just to add a little more texture there, hearing you say things like, you have to move yourself to action and not get paralyzed, let's say, by overthinking, right? Or you have to force yourself to explore things that had nothing to do with why you grew in the first place. Or you have to become adaptable when not being adaptable brought success for a while, or something like that. It definitely seems to have a component, at least, maybe more than that you have to be able to look inward. You have to have a certain degree of introspection about, okay, I have to reconfigure myself to get to this next plateau, or whatever the case may be. So just a little more fleshed out there, but definitely interested in your insight there.
There's two things that come to mind for me. And I love that question, so I'm going to have to remember it and ask other people. But one thing I think about, I don't know if you're familiar with Jocko Willink, but
Yes.
One of his tenets is step, go, right? You have to be willing to make that step. Don't know what the right direction is. Don't know what, if you're going to be able to cover the expenses. Step, go, right? So that's one thing that comes to mind. But the other is the transformation happens in the transaction. And what I mean by that is, like, for instance, when I decide to invest in my own personal development, the transformation actually happens when I decide that I need this and I am worth investing in. And likewise, if you're a business owner and you see that your team's struggling to track your customer information and you decide to invest in the CRM and go through the pain of training everybody and making sure they follow those trainings, that's where the transformation actually happens. And you're going to enjoy the fruit of that labor and that decision much, much later on. But the transformation happens in that decision. I'm going to make this outlandish expenditure and go through the pain of implementation in order to get myself to the next level. So the transformation happens in the transaction.
Yeah, I love that. Very familiar with Jocko's, here's a picture of my watch at 4:30. His posts about that. I've gotten to 5 a.m., but not quite 4:30. So let's pivot a little bit, David, to, we'll talk about like growth and enterprise value a little bit. What do you think, in your opinion, what builds long-term enterprise value versus just generating short-term revenue? In other words, you can make transactions that are going to make you money, but how are you going beyond that to the point where you're able to see off in the distance years-wise and say, okay, this is actually growing the brand. This is actually going to bring more value much later, further down the road to the entire enterprise?
Yeah. So the answer depends on the nature of the business. But one thing that I see far too many business owners and businesses focused on is the power of reoccurring revenue. I was talking to my friend Brandon, who's starting his own HVAC company, and he's really focused on, hey, I know that I want to do, I love the jobs where I get to do a full install. I don't like the ticky tacky maintenance, and I have to do both in order to grow my business. That's one level of awareness as to how you grow your business. And what I was encouraging him to think through is, how do you get reoccurring revenue, Brandon? How do you ensure that whether you go and do an install or a maintenance call or not, that you're going to be able to cover your monthly expenses? And so I was getting him to think through. I was like, Brandon, let me tell you something. I have changed the last HVAC filter in my life. And this is like literally just a couple months ago. Let me tell you, I have this HVAC that's old and decrepit. And I was told by one HVAC guy, here's the filter you need. And I was like, great. I bought that filter. And when it came time to change out the filter, I crammed one up there. And it was hot, dusty, and I crammed it up there. And something didn't seem right. So the next time I call another HVAC person, I said, what's not right? And he said, oh, well, you actually need two of them, and they're supposed to fit in there diagonally, not sideways, but diagonally. If you're not watching this, like there's two that meet like the roof point of a rooftop.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, okay, that seems easy. So let me tell you, 3 months ago, I'm trying to change my filters, and I have broken one in half, like they're crumped in there, and I just said, Brandon, I'm done. I would rather pay somebody a subscription, a monthly subscription, a retainer or something, so that I know twice a year they're going to come and change my air filter for me, and I can just forget it. I can never have to do this again. You should think about offering that. And that's something that creates real enterprise value. When every customer you've touched is now on a subscription and they're now not worried about it and they're not thinking about calling somebody else if they have a problem, that's powerful. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I see what you're saying. You kind of take somebody that is very transactional in a sense in the moment, and you've now extended them out open ended, and they're just they're going to help the business accumulate revenue, goodwill, word of mouth. I mean, all kinds of effects can come from that as you hold on to that customer longer. So really love that. If we pull it in a little bit timing wise, if somebody's take a business owner today, they're thinking to themselves, I'd really like to unload this business. I'd like to sell and exit that way in 3 to 5 years. What should they probably? I mean, obviously, this is theoretical, but what should they probably start doing differently now? Is what you just said some of that in terms of how can I convert people over to from a one time to a subscription? There are other things on top of that, or what do you think is the most important thing they should start thinking about they're probably not doing today?
Yeah, great question. I actually develop business valuation audits for business owners that want to know about this. And again, I give you the roadmap so that you understand whether you want to sell in 2 years or 10 years, what kinds of things are going to trip up people that, from a financing perspective, from investment perspective, from a buyer perspective, what are the big rocks that are going to be problematic and keep you from attracting the most number of buyers? And some of the things that actually bubble up to the surface is owner dependency. I think we've already mentioned that. The owner does everything, or a lot of the success of the business hinges on the owner's connections, on his ability or her ability to run the team or be the connective glue that connects the team together. That's a really sneaky trap that a lot of people fall into. They think, oh man, good job, you did this, you did it, you hired this massive team and but you've become like this like admin glue where like your sales team can't do anything without you checking in with them and then passing on the critical information to the marketing team. And like you're just as like this, again, tactical admin person now in your business that's holding the team together. So owner dependency is one that I would highlight really strongly. Also, just starting to ensure that your financials are in order. the number one thing that a prospective buyer is going to want to look at is your financials. And so it might be time to start thinking like, does it make sense to invest in bookkeeping, or making sure that we're regularly filing our tax returns? Like some small changes like that actually have a really meaningful impact on your ability to sell. And the third one is to the degree that your systems and processes are documented and repeatable. That's something else that, again, if there's a long time horizon, let's start documenting it. And it doesn't have to be this huge project. It's literally like, well, talk to me about how you call customers. What are the top things that you need to know about that customer? And you just like literally record them talking about it. And you're like, great, that's the new SOP. And you can give that to the next salesperson. Make sure when you call them, you get these 5 things, however you do that. That's the process now. So, I think owner dependency, making sure your financials are in order, and that your systems and processes are documented and repeatable. Those are 3 things that are going to have a exponential impact on your valuation and the price that you can get for your business.
Yeah, really appreciate that, David. It's some of the best practical advice I think we've gotten on the podcast to date. So I really, really appreciate that. Very actionable stuff, concrete. I think people can wrap their head around that, start dissecting and moving out on those types of things if they're in this particular boat. So let's kind of reverse it a little bit. What's one growth strategy that you would say looks good on paper, looks impressive, sounds impressive, but actually has more tendency to erode value, could take away from what the business is trying to do, sort of surreptitiously. They think they're headed in the right direction, they're actually taking steps backwards? Or is there anything that even fits that kind of trap definition like that?
Man, you are bringing the good questions for everybody that's listening. These are great questions. I do 2 podcasts a week. These are great questions.
Thank you. Put you through your paces here.
Yeah, absolutely. Worth the wait. So I think the sneaky one that nobody's talking about is actually revenue. Everybody's chasing revenue. The more money you make, the better your company is, right? The more secure your company is, right? The higher exit price you're going to get, right? Wrong. Revenue actually can be one of those things that you just said erodes your ability to deliver. If you're just chasing revenue, chasing customers, and you're slowly getting, expanding your reach beyond what you can support, or your capability to deliver well, or, all these things, you're just adding more and more product lines because you want to sell more. Now you're carrying this massive inventory. Those are things that actually, again, look great on paper. Look at the revenues going up. Is it sustainable? Again, I look at everything through that risk lens. So is it sustainable? Does it make sense? Like one of the companies that I'm working with, a business owner right now, I just looked at their SKU level and I said, like, more product isn't more. We have to cut this by 2/3 in order to hit the revenue goals that you actually want. We want to focus on your target customer. We don't want everybody buying. That's terrible for the brand, the business, all of it. And we can't even support it. So revenue is that sneaky one that everybody thinks is, how can more money be bad? It can be.
Gotcha. No, that's excellent. Let's something we haven't done in the podcast before. Let's try a little bit of rapid fire. Just throw a question. You can throw a couple words at it. We'll keep it moving.
Yep.
See how that goes.
I like it.
If there's something more deep dive, we can come back to it. So let's start with most overrated growth tactic.
Marketing.
Okay,
I think, yeah, just spending more money on marketing, the whole, let's try meta ads, right? You should not be spending any money on marketing unless you know there's going to be an ROI.
Okay. Excellent. What do you think the most underrated tactic is?
An admin assistant.
Okay. Really interesting. Okay, I'll violate my own rules here, David. It's really interesting you say that. A book that had a pretty big impression on me was The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. The same guy who wrote The One Thing, and now his name is escaping me.
Okay.
From Keller Williams. The guy who started the Keller Williams empire. He was saying in The Millionaire Real Estate Agent that everybody wants to hire marketers and advertisers and all these fancy things. hire an admin assistant, get the paperwork off your desk, get the low level processes out of your wheelhouse and onto somebody else. And I think it's really, really interesting that you said that about the most underrated tactic.
100%.
Actually, can you expand on a little bit? I mean,
Yep.
how have you sort of witnessed or experienced the difference that can make for somebody to take that step and sort of let go of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I literally was chatting with an attorney, a very successful attorney, in the last couple of weeks, and he has this massive revenue target. He's chasing revenue, and he thinks that he can get there by just working harder. And I asked him point blank, I was like, "Can you get to that revenue goal without an admin hire?" And he still hasn't answered me. He left me on red. So, I know that it is impossible because he's not focused on the thing where he adds the most value as an owner, as the attorney. He's doing all of this administrative. Again, you become the administrative glue that holds your business, together. And so the first step on the ladder as you go up has to be admin. You have to get rid of that admin in order to free you up for higher impact activities and to allow your brain to engage on the more important things. And I've seen it time and again. I've seen it with VC founders, extremely successful CEOs. In my own business, right? Admin has to be the first.
Gotcha. We'll go back into the rapid
Yep, I'm ready.
One book every founder should read.
Buy Back Your Time. Dan Martell. In fact, I don't know if you can see
the title sounded familiar, but I could not think of it.
I literally, it's in my background. Like I read it. I've probably read it twice in the last 6 months. He's a personal mentor of mine. Buy Back Your Time.
Awesome. I'm going to add that to my list. One belief you hold that you think most marketers, I mean, we kind of, it was the first answer you gave, that they would disagree with. I think that actually goes well to your first answer.
It is possible to know what your audience cares about, how they want to be spoken to, and what moves them to action. That's something that in the last year, I found the right marketing partner. And now, again, there has to be an ROI. And now I know if I'm going to spend money on marketing that is going to get this result because I've done the underlying testing and studying. And it can be known. You don't have to guess and throw spaghetti at the wall.
Okay. And lastly, what's going to stop working in the next 24 months?
I think everybody's starting an AI startup.
No, that one resonated because I do follow a bunch of guys in the AI space, and about all of them are suggesting just to do just that. So it's really, really interesting that you went there.
I would
follow that thread a little bit.
Yeah, I would say I think her name was Carlotta Mendez. I don't know. Don't quote me on the last name. Carlotta, though. She made it her life study to look at all of the revolutions in human existence. And I'm talking, like the age of iron, the steam, like internet, all of these revolutions. And she mapped them roughly to this curve. And I believe that we are in this curve of exuberance. Everybody's excited. And again, for our generation, we remember like the .com bubble burst. Everybody's excited about the internet. Everybody's all in on the internet. And then the .com bubble burst. And it's not that adopting the internet was the wrong choice or being up to date in technology was the bad choice. It was betting the entire farm, like quitting your job and building an internet company was the wrong choice. Because there's this disruption that happens, this crash, and the people that are in a position to pick up the pieces on the other side of that are the ones that are going to be the generationally wealthy people, the entrepreneurs, the owners that are of significance. And if you don't have the ability to weather that eventual right sizing, bubble burst, call it whatever you want, you're going to lose big.
Okay, I love that we went. I didn't even planned an AI question, but that came out perfectly. And I think I lived through the .com bubble. Remember the whole sequence of events there. So what you're saying really resonates. Looking for those patterns from early 2000s to now, early 2020, mid 2020s. And it is interesting to see how there's some serious overlap between the two experiences. Just sort of change the topic, but the sequence of events feels the same. It has a ring to it, I guess you would say. So really, really appreciate that insight, David. I think as we start to wind down here, I know marketing is not, your central focal point, but I wanted to ask this question, I think, out of a lot of curiosity personally. I'm a big follower of Gary Vaynerchuk. He had a big impact on my sense of like what you do when you're trying to market things and brand them and stuff like that. And I think, there's always this tug of war I come across between should somebody focus entirely on creative output, organic creative output, to put lots of information and content onto all these social platforms and so forth. And then there's this sort of counter argument that you zero in on what you're trying to achieve, and you just pay for the ads, you pay for the marketing to try to nail down that particular segment, and the rest is just a waste of time. So you have these sort of ends of the spectrum. Is there anything as you've worked with these businesses that you've worked with, you've done scaling, you've helped business owners, have you noticed anything about that you would say gives you a tendency towards one or the other, or insight as to which one may be superior or more appropriate? Just any thoughts you have on that, definitely would appreciate it.
I'm going to split the difference on this answer here. You mentioned Gary V, love Gary V, but I'm going to reference the person behind the scenes that took him to stardom. Do you know Caleb? Caleb Ralston? He built the media empire and the presence behind Gary, and now he's creating his own content. And he's very much of the, yes, make content, and content is the key, but it starts with, you have to do something really impressive. You have to be somebody or have done something that people care about and want in their lives or want to emulate, etc. And if you don't have that, then you're kind of just a phony, right? Like, it's impossible to have exuberance and aspiration in your marketing that is ultimately going to get you the other outcomes that you're probably looking for as a result of your marketing. And so he's like, stop positioning yourself as the expert. You can be a learner and document your process, and people are going to want to learn them. But it starts with doing something that people care about and is of a significance. And I think that's actually the key. And so I'm kind of splitting the difference there.
No, I mean, that is a worthy insight either way. I absolutely appreciate that. It is interesting what you said about the sort of the phony aspect. I can distinctly remember a clip where Gary was asked, well, what if I'm interested in something but I don't know much about it yet? He's like, well, you're an enthusiast. Don't put yourself out there as an expert. Mm-hmm. Put yourself out there as someone who's enthusiastic about the subject matter. And I think, in personal reflection, I'm like, I think the reason a lot of people wait to be an expert is they're just afraid of the embarrassment. Like, hey, I'm gonna try this thing. I think I'm interested in it. I'm gonna document it, and then along the way, I find out I'm no good at it, and I document it. So it's something. Again, it's almost this emotional discipline we talk about. You have to get over the idea that you're gonna look bad, or it's gonna not work out the way you hoped it would, or something like that. You have to find a way to overcome those things. So yeah, really, really interesting thoughts there, David. I have to say, just the entire discussion, the entire conversation. Really, really enjoyed it and appreciated it. And I think our audience is going to take a lot of practical insight from it, especially if they're in this boat of I'm trying to scale, I'm trying to exit, I'm trying to sell the business, that sort of thing. So can't thank you enough for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you for creating, again, like a tremendously thoughtful conversation. And, I think one thing to kind of close out your last question, if I may, I totally lost it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were talking about the whole, is it targeted marketing versus creative output, volume of creative output. You split that difference. And I think, I think it's, maybe it's even personality driven to some extent. What somebody can kind of tolerate, if you will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And maybe they're playing to their own strengths, and that's why it's sort of, not always one answer or the other, depending on the person themselves,
I remember what I was going to say, and I know why I forgot, because I was going to be really transparent and vulnerable. Yeah. But you said, people don't start because they feel like they have to be an expert. And I actually struggle with remembering that I I don't want to be the expert. I don't want to position myself as the expert. I don't really consider myself an expert in a lot of things that I talk about. And it's constantly reminding myself, I'm a guide. I'm a couple steps ahead of somebody else, and that still is tremendously valuable to somebody. But I don't have to position myself as the expert, the know-it-all. I'm just here learning, and again, to your point, documenting what worked, what didn't, the journey. And that reframe has made all the difference for me, and it's something that I again am continually reminding myself of daily, hourly, with each piece of content that I make. Is like I'm just the guide. I'm not the expert.
Okay, so that's twice, David. I think you've left with very resonant phrases. That the 80% is 100% awesome, and then I'm a guide and I'm a few steps ahead of somebody. And you're right. I mean, I think so many times in life we don't think of it maybe in this context, but we want to do something, we don't know how to do it. We're just looking for somebody who lived and did it before, and we're not necessarily looking for the subject matter expert. Just, hey, did you encounter this before? What happened when you did? That sort of thing. And I think just that jump start, that little bit at the beginning to get you going can be the most valuable thing you come across and try to solve a problem or deal with an issue or whatnot. So absolutely love that. I know we'll be clipping that into a short. There'll be many shorts from this, but that will definitely be one of them. David, where can people find you? Want to find out more about you and what you're doing? Where can they go see that?
Yep. I am most active on Instagram, and you can find me at the David Hori. Again, that's at the David Hori, Hori. And I'm easy to find. I'm on all the other socials, but Instagram is my main game. And you'll find information about me there, the weekly webinar that I give for business owners that are like not sure where to start, but they know now, oh gosh, I wasn't planning on selling my business. It wasn't on my radar. But now that you said that, how terrible option 2 is, I'm thinking about it. I have a webinar for them. So that's free, and happy to do that for people as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, David. Really, really appreciate it. Definitely want to have you back. Hopefully you'll come back and join us again sometime in the near future. So really, really appreciate it.
Chris, I will be back anytime you invite. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David.